There's a scar on my face, just below the center of my brow. For 20 years, every time I've gone to get new glasses, I've made a point of picking frames with a wider bridge, just enough to cover it. When people ask, I tell them I fell as a kid. That's not technically a lie. I did fall. It's just that nobody knows what I was trying to get away from when it happened. I grew up in Liwan, Guangzhou, a district in the southwest of the city. You might have heard of Xihua Road. It's one of Guangzhou's most famous food streets, always packed, always loud. But at the far end of that road, there's a pedestrian overpass that spans 5 or 6 sets of railway tracks. The locals around there have always called it Rainbow Bridge. The tracks underneath used to serve an old coal depot, freight lines for hauling coal in and out. Back then, trains still passed through parts of that railway area from time to time, and adults were always warning kids not to cut across the tracks. Later, when the old coal depot was converted into a park, most people assumed that freight line had been abandoned. For a long time, at least during the day, you almost never saw trains passing through anymore. But the tracks were never removed. Every now and then, a freight train would still come through. There was no fixed schedule, sometimes late at night, sometimes early in the morning. And because freight trains didn't pass as often as passenger trains, a lot of kids in the neighborhood believed the line was already dead. The adults never believed that. They kept warning us not to cut across the tracks. My elementary school was right next to that bridge. Every single day, going to school and coming home, I had to walk across it. Unlike the busy stretch of Xihua Road, Rainbow Bridge mostly saw local foot traffic, not a huge number of people. But for a quiet overpass, it had a strange way of attracting incidents. I was around 4th grade, maybe 10 years old, when one morning I headed to school the usual way. From a distance, I could already see a crowd gathered on the bridge, everyone leaning over the railing, pointing and shouting at something below. I squeezed through to look. There was a person lying on the ground under the bridge. Someone had jumped. It was the first time in my life I'd seen a real body. The person's head was tilted at a deeply wrong angle. Blood was everywhere. I'd always been a fairly fearless kid. At the time, I wasn't particularly scared. I just took it for an accident and moved on. What I didn't expect was that over the next 2 years, that bridge would keep showing up in bad news. Someone cut across the tracks underneath instead of taking the overpass and was hit by a train. Someone else climbed over the railing and fell and didn't make it. Each time, I wasn't there when it happened. I only heard about it afterward from the adults. Accidents near the railway area didn't feel that unusual. After a while, I stopped asking about it. Time moved on. Eventually, I went to vocational college. Around that time, I joined an online volunteer group chat and got to know a few new people. A handful of them were really into amateur ghost hunting. You know, the kind of thing where young people dare each other to go to supposedly haunted places in the middle of the night. They invited me along once. I figured, why not? The location was an abandoned old house at the end of Fangchun Bar Street in Guangzhou. It was said to be one of the 10 most haunted places in the city. People quietly passed around stories that the place wasn't clean, that something was off about it. Not dirty, just wrong in a way that didn't have a name. Honestly, though, a lot of these places are just talk. That night, we poked around and couldn't even get inside. The door was locked solid. The only thing we managed to find was a window with a cracked opening. I stuck my head in and looked. Pure darkness. I couldn't make out anything at all. What I do remember is the smell. An overwhelming wave of mold and rotting wood. The air inside felt thick and stale. We'd gone out in the middle of the night and couldn't even get through the door. Pretty anticlimactic. So we just turned around and headed back. We were just passing under Rainbow Bridge on the way home when, For no clear reason, I made a decision. Tonight, I wasn't going to take the overpass. I was going to cut across the tracks. It's not like I didn't know this place had a history. I'd grown up knowing something was off about these tracks. But I told myself, the line had been out of service for years. There was no way a train was coming through. What was the worst that could happen? And honestly, after a night of ghost hunting, I was still riding a bit of an adrenaline high. I wanted one more small thrill. So I stepped onto the tracks. It was dark in every direction, no other people around. At first, the only thing I noticed was how loud the insects were in the trees on both sides of the tracks. Otherwise, nothing seemed wrong. But as I kept walking, I got the unmistakable feeling that something was watching me. The air started to feel different. It was a hot summer night, but the temperature dropped, suddenly, sharply. A cold that sank straight into the bones. I looked back over my shoulder. Nothing behind me. But something kept insisting, low and persistent. Something is wrong. I picked up my pace. The feeling didn't go away. When I tried to look back one more time, I got halfway through the turn. I couldn't move. A sensation flooded in from behind me, like being submerged in water. The lights from the apartment buildings in the distance blurred and softened. The insect noise, which had been almost deafening a moment ago, faded out, like hearing it through a layer of water. And then, in my right peripheral vision, I saw something. A massive dark shape, with a faint point of light at its center, moving fast along the tracks, coming straight at me from a distance. It was too dark, and that strange drowning feeling was too disorienting. I couldn't tell what it was. But in the split second before I felt it hit, an image flashed through my mind. A train, head-on, bearing down on me. I tried to scream. All that came out was a low, strangled sound from the back of my throat. My body felt like it had been filled with concrete. I couldn't move, couldn't pull free. I've thought about that feeling many times since. It wasn't like sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis feels like being anesthetized. Your brain disconnects from your body. This was different. It was like the air itself had turned solid. Like a dozen invisible hands had locked around my arms and legs. I fought against it. My body could barely twitch. The shadow kept coming. I felt a deep vibration move through everything around me. A low, dense hum filled my ears. Something like the sound of a tuning fork pressed right against your head. It was almost on top of me. And then something animal took over. I wrenched my arm upward with everything I had and threw myself forward. Everything went black. The pain almost knocked me out. When I pulled myself up off the ground, both hands were torn and bleeding from the gravel along the tracks. The worst of it was my nose. I'd hit it directly on one of the rails. Blood covered half my face. My mouth, too, somehow. Even my tongue was bleeding. And the world around me snapped back to normal. The first thing I did after I pulled myself up was turn my head. Behind me, the tracks were empty. No train, no light, no wheels grinding over the rails. Not even a rush of wind passing over my face. The insects were loud again. The lights in the apartment buildings were clear and sharp. The summer heat pressed back against my skin. I stayed there in the gravel, shaking. But I remembered it clearly. From the moment that shadow started moving toward me to the moment I hit the ground, I never heard anything pass by. Whatever that dark shape was, it simply disappeared, as if it had never been on those tracks at all. I ran home covered in blood, got a thorough scolding from my family, and was dragged to the hospital. Everything healed up fine except for one spot, just below the center of my brow, where a scar remained. I was lucky I didn't wear glasses yet. 20 years have passed. I've never gone on another ghost hunting trip, or any late-night dare like that. I haven't encountered anything I couldn't explain since, but that scar is still there. Every time I catch it in the mirror, I think about that night, about what it was exactly that came at me on those tracks that had been dead for years, where no train was ever supposed to run again. That was a first-hand account I collected from someone in Guangzhou. This channel is just getting started. I'll keep searching for these real, unexplained experiences in every corner I can find and bring them to you. If something like this has happened to you or someone you know, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Maybe your story is the next one I tell. And if you want to hear more stories like this, consider subscribing. For a new channel like this one, it really does make a difference. Thank you.